Hello, I'm Anna P. Santos. Welcome to Rappler Talk. What does the Philippines have in common with the Vatican? They are now the only two countries in the world where divorce is now not legal. Now that may be understandable in the mostly male, and if I may add, celibate Vatican state, but in the Philippines, it makes breaking up very hard to do. In 2011, only 50% of Filipinos supported divorce. Now, from a March 2015 survey, those in favor of divorce grew to 60%. How will this affect the Philippines' current stand on divorce? How does not having a divorce law impact issues like violence against women or child support? Joining us now are lawyers Evelyn Ursua and Ginger Castillo. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon.
And thank you very much for joining us. Now, I'm going to go right into the issue. The survey that we quoted there was from the Social Weather Station. In 2011, that was just 4 years ago, 50% of Filipinos supported divorce. Medyo 50-50 pa tayo. But now that number has grown to 60%. What do you think is driving this, Attorney Ursua?
Well, maybe changes in attitude among the young people. I think most of those who favor divorce are young people. I think more openness among our people in terms of addressing the problems of marriage. So whereas before the old people were told, for example, to stay put in a miserable marriage, today the young, they know that they have other options. And so I think that in terms of exploring other options, they have realized that we need a divorce law in the Philippines. I think also, and this is one of my guesses, I think that people are more open now after the experience in pushing for a reproductive health law.
Okay.
In expressing their sentiments against the dominant way of thinking, particularly against the dominance of Catholic views in this country.
All right. I think what we were saying earlier was that the discussion on the reproductive health bill actually showed us you could be a Catholic and support reproductive health.
Yes.
Now you could still be a Catholic and support divorce.
Yes, I think people are beginning to realize that it doesn't have to be either or. Of course, the Catholic Church is saying that it cannot be, that it's against the teachings of the Catholic Church. But I think the young, the educated, they have realized that they can harmonize their right to choose with their Catholic belief.
All right. And Attorney Castillo, you have a very interesting profile. You are a lawyer, but you have also secured an annulment whilst defending yourself and representing yourself in court. Punta muna tayo dun sa unang question. What do you think is tipping the balance? Why are more Filipinos now showing more favor for divorce?
First, when you file an annulment case, it's a very traumatic process. You have to remember everything from the time that you met until the time that you split up. And you have to write it down. And that would be traumatic for a person. Whereas in divorce, you just end it. You know? So maybe people just want to end the marriage without having to air their dirty laundry in public.
So our viewers will understand, why do you have to go to day one? You know, under the current annulment process, why do we have to go back to day one from what you were saying, that you have to think about what went wrong and go back to day one na mag-boyfriend pa lang kayo, hindi pa kayo kasali? Why is that so important in an annulment proceeding?
Because the only ground for an annulment here in the Philippines is Article 36, psychological incapacity. It's either you or your husband, or both of you are psychologically incapacitated. Psychological incapacity should have existed at the time of marriage. So you should show that it was there before, and it was there after, and it increased in gravity and severity. These were just concepts before, but I understood it fully when I was getting my annulment.
And there, please tell us, from the point of view of someone who has secured an annulment and gone through that, as you said, a very traumatic process, what was it like?
First, you write your narration. Then, while you're writing it, you remember everything.
Wow.
You remember and relive everything because you have to read it. Okay? It took me 6 months. I was getting chest pains. After that, you go to a psychiatrist. And you tell the psychiatrist how you were brought up, how your ex was brought up. And you go through a barrage of exams just to see if you're psychologically incapacitated. After that, you pay the filing. You draft your petition, it's finally done after several revisions. So you have to remember and relive every time you read it. You file it, you pay the filing fees. Lucky for me, my lawyer didn't charge me anything.
Because you're
Because
a
I
lawyer.
represented myself.
Suma total, Attorney Castillo, masakit na sa puso, masakit pa sa bulsa.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if I weren't a lawyer, I would have difficulty telling someone about my experiences because, you know, it's not easy telling someone about your sex life.
Kailangan pa ba yun?
Yes. Because the more kinky, the more psychologically incapacitated.
Ay. And then what else? You know, we have to go into that very personal, very intimate details of your marriage that you have to bring into a public courtroom.
Yes.
Can you describe that for me? Anong feeling nun?
It's very painful because after paying for everything, you sit down there and you are cross-examined like you are a liar. You know, you're already the aggrieved party. That's why you're here. You already paid. You already went through the traumatic experience of drafting your petition, talking to the psychologist or the psychiatrist, and here you are being cross-examined by this person who doesn't even know anything about your marriage and who is trying to make you look like a liar.
Because that is the duty of the fiscal.
That
no?
is the duty of
under the law, he is supposed to defend the marriage.
Yes, the
okay.
fiscal or the Solicitor General,
Right.
the Office of the Solicitor General.
And we're just trying to come up with, you know, these explanations to show that those are the prescriptions of the law, and that's why in real life this is what happens. No, when you implement those laws, that's what happens. Despite,
Can I
yes,
just add
please.
something? So, when a marriage fails, you have the option of staying put in the marriage, keeping the marriage, or filing, like for example, for legal separation. You don't touch the marriage stays, but you're entitled to live separately, legally, in the eyes of the law. You're legally married. So there are consequences there. And then, of course, if we want to end the marriage, that's where the challenge lies. Because if the ending the marriage here in the Philippines, if you're not a Muslim, you're not entitled to divorce. So if you're not a Muslim Filipino, the family code applies. In which case, either you find something to end the marriage without invoking psychological incapacity, meaning you find some other ground, declaration of nullity, for example, on the ground of lack of marriage license, or something like that.
Or you're
But
underage.
if all the requirements were met during the celebration of the marriage, there's really only one thing that you can use, if it can be used, and that is psychological incapacity.
Yes.
So this is what was being described. You say that the marriage was void from the beginning because one or both of the parties were psychologically incapacitated, and the Supreme Court has interpreted the elements of psychological incapacity. So one is, it has to be existing at the time of the celebration of the marriage, although it manifested only after.
Right.
It must be so grave, and it must be incurable. So these things actually, the conditions for you to prove psychological incapacity are difficult, and you need a psychiatrist to say that the elements are there at existing for the judge to grant the petition. So some cases don't meet the requirements. Other cases don't meet the requirements, but then, if you have a creative lawyer and you have creative psychiatrists and creative psychologists, you're able to.
Right,
I mean, this is something that we know in practice. Maybe some of us don't do it, but this is a reality that we have to admit. It happens in the process.
Okay, so it's already very tedious because you have to go through, you have to relive the bad aspects of your marriage all the time, until you go to court. And we all know that it takes a very long time to get an annulment. Secondly, the only acceptable, or actually also the most used grounds for annulment are psychological incapacity.
Because it ends the marriage.
Yes.
Technically, it's called declaration of nullity, but laypersons call it annulment.
Yes.
So let's stick to annulment. But there are many grounds for annulment. But if you want to end a marriage where there was nothing wrong at the time of the celebration, on the surface, but you want to say the marriage has failed, so psychological incapacity is the way to go. So that's why people, when they say annulment, they usually refer to psychological incapacity.
Okay. And that's the ground so that we used to
Yes.
get an annulment. But those terms that we were throwing out, the psychiatrist, you need to get a psychiatrist, somebody needs to be declared psychologically
Yes.
incapacitated. Those sound like scary terms. You know, merong ang questions lagi na napupunta sa amin is, what does it mean for me kung ako'y magpa-declare ng psychologically incapacitated? Will it hamper my chances of getting a job later on? Will it look like I cannot hold a job?
No, actually, the court has answered that. The rule is, even if you've been declared psychologically incapacitated in the marriage, it shouldn't affect your work. I mean, it doesn't mean that you are also psychologically incapacitated with respect to your profession or with respect to your work, or you can't get married again. So
Okay.
that's actually the irony of it. You can get married again. You can be a competent professional. You can be, one of the best doctors in the country, in the world, or one of the best lawyers, and yet you're psychologically incapacitated in your marriage. So actually, there are issues there, and there are technical issues,
May I add?
psychological issues, and all that.
Yes, please.
You may
Attorney
be
Castillo.
psychologically incapacitated as regards one person, but not with another. Like if, for
That's
instance, you're narcissistic and your husband is narcissistic, you can't go together.
So it's just a fancy way of saying you're not made for each other.
Yeah.
You're not made for this person.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's really strange. No? I
Yes.
mean, if you have a personality disorder that is serious, that is incurable,
Exactly.
I don't understand why
It
doesn't
only applies
apply.
to one
Yes,
person.
exactly. So that's why I said
Oh.
I think there are many issues there. And
Because if the other person, let's say, has a dependent personality disorder and you're narcissistic, then the dependent would be adoring you and you'd be a happy person.
Oh, so may mga ganun. It sounds very, very complicated. But
Yes.
even if it is a complicated, expensive, and tedious process, the number of annulment cases being filed are actually growing. These are numbers from the Office of the Solicitor General. In 2010, there were 8,283 cases. In 2011, that number rose to 10,257 cases. It seems to be consistent also with the survey, where we see that more and more Filipinos are saying they actually want divorce. Kahit na mahirap, kahit na matagal, kahit na mahal gawin ang annulment. Kaya ba nila mas gusto na lang ng divorce? What is the difference? How will divorce simplify these problems, at least, that
well,
you
for
pointed
one,
out?
it's going to be straightforward. And we should be straightforward about the law. We shouldn't make it difficult for people to fix their lives. Can you imagine a country with, let us say, 50% of failed marriages, and then people just stay in the failed marriage, and then the children suffer, everyone suffers? How can you be productive in a miserable family life? I think when we say that, the family is the basic unit of society, that really means that everything that happens in the family affects society. So one cannot be productive if one's family life is not fixed. And let's be practical about it. It affects so many things. So I think what's happening now is people are saying, I'm not going to suffer. I have the right not to suffer. And I will take whatever is there as a remedy. I will use it. I will maximize it no matter that it's difficult. I'm willing to go through it because that's the only way to go. Unless, of course, what I'll do is I'll migrate and become a citizen of another country so that I can have divorce.
Actually, Attorney Ursua, a very interesting point. I'll just touch on that. The New York Times once dubbed labor migration, yung pagiging OFW natin,
Yes.
as the Filipino way of divorce.
Well, yeah.
It's the polite way of leaving
Yes.
for a lot of women, no?
But also, even if they go there, they divorce, if they remain Filipinos, the Philippine law still applies to them. And so pagbalik nila dito, kahit na kumuha sila ng divorce sa ibang bansa, hindi pa rin valid yan under Philippine law. And so itong our lack of divorce here in the Philippines actually complicates matters for our overseas Filipino workers, for the migrant workers abroad. Kasi they think, because they're not advised, they think that when I get the divorce over there, they come home, they're no longer married, they can marry again, when actually it's wrong.
Pero teka lang, nakakuha sila ng divorce. So dun sa bansa na yon where they got the divorce, they're seen as divorced and
Yes.
okay to marry.
Yes.
But when
Actually,
they come
no.
back to the Philippines,
Actually, no. Because now they are requiring you to produce a certificate of no marriage.
is this the Senomar?
The Senomar. Before
in some
getting married
countries,
in some countries. So you have to produce your Senomar
Oh.
from the Philippines. And of course, the Philippines will still say that you're married.
So
But
it
in
is-
other countries, they're able to
Yes.
get it, right? Without
Yes,
any
in
kind
other-
of
So it depends on the requirements of the country where you are at. Really, so this is some of the complications that arise from being the only country in the world where there is no divorce. Just to
And the irony there is we recognize dual citizenship. So this is the problem.
Is that a conflict?
Oh yes, definitely. Because if you are, let us say, if you are, let us say you're a French citizen and you're a Filipino citizen at the same time, you just invoke your French citizenship. You go to a French court and you say, "I want a divorce," and because the French law allows it, and you're a French national citizen, you're covered also by French law. It is valid under French law. You can come back here and say, "Here, I have already a valid divorce. I'm a French citizen also." And our courts should recognize it because
but they will not
because of the dual citizen. No.
Oh,
Our
they will.
courts should recognize it because the only requirement is the divorce is valid under the law of the country of the citizenship where you got the divorce.
But
So
does
even
it
if
matter
you
where
have-
you got married? No.
No, it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
It's the citizenship that matters. So this is the complication. The complication is you're a Filipino citizen. You're also, let's say, a French citizen. You get a divorce there using your French citizenship.
Right.
You come home, you have it recognized. Perfectly all right. It should be perfectly all right.
But then again, Article 26 of our Family Code requires that the foreign spouse should obtain the divorce against the Filipino, authorizing the foreign spouse to remarry. And if that foreign spouse is authorized to remarry under his laws, then the Filipino spouse can remarry here. So if you're dual citizenship, what are you?
Really complicated matters here. We have some questions from social media. One of them is, how long does it take to get an annulment? How long is the annulment process? Would you like to go first, Attorney?
No, she would like to go
All
first.
right. Attorney Castillo.
It would depend on the court where the case is filed, because in some jurisdictions like Quezon City and Manila, these courts have very large jurisdictions, so they have many cases. You can average at around 4 years.
4 years.
4 years in some courts, like in Pasig, 2 years. But I heard that if you file in the provinces, you can get it in 6 months. I just heard.
Just very regular. That's my comment.
What do you mean by regular?
Irregular.
Irregular. Okay. What do you mean by irregular? Sorry.
Well, a 6-month litigation process, that is so irregular because if you count from the time of the filing to the time that a judge decides a case, you wouldn't be able to make it in 6 months if you just follow the regular process.
So what would be a realistic timetable?
Maybe a year would be a reasonable one, but to say 6 months, I mean, it assumes a lot of things. Number one, that the judge, the court is so competent, is so industrious. The staff are really hardworking. They do everything so quickly. As in, when you file it on the same day, they issue the summons on the same day. The next day, the summons are served on the other side, and then the other side gets a lawyer so quickly, and then doesn't ask for extension to file an answer. You know what I mean? I mean, the process is so quick that in 6 months, you already have a decision.
But I've also heard that, to quicken the process, you can either do one of two things. One is you hire a hitman, which is cheaper than the annulment process. I had one respondent say that. And the second is you just pay your way through the process.
Well, yeah, I've heard about that.
I've heard about
I
that.
know some people who did that.
Now, isn't that another problem with annulment? Only those who, if you can't afford to pay your way, what happens? What are my choices? What are the choices of the regular average Filipinos who are suffering in bad marriages and went out?
Actually, yes, that's one argument. We want to improve the system. We don't want people to resort to corruption out of desperation. So we want the law to be straightforward. We don't want the psychiatrists, the psychologists to corrupt their discipline in order to satisfy a litigant's, need to have a marriage ended. We don't want people to go to the judge and beg, please, 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 make a finding of psychological incapacity. If the law is straightforward, if the law is truly responsive to the realities of a failed marriage, I believe that corruption will be lessened.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Now, Attorney Ginger, matagal talaga yung proseso ng annulment. What happens in between? Is your life in limbo while you're waiting for a decision? What happens to those couples?
Well, I can say that I could not acquire properties during that time.
Yeah, true.
Because if I did, then that would become part of the absolute community.
A conjugal, or what is it?
Yes.
Conjugal property, and you'd have to share it.
And during the time, I was very nervous because if my ex incurred any liability, that would be a conjugal liability as
true.
well.
Like when you say liabilities, that debt or
Yeah.
other things
Utang,
like
utang.
that?
That.
Mm.
Or, if he runs over a person,
Okay.
he would be liable to that person for hospitalization, etc. That would be a conjugal liability.
So you are no longer living together as
No.
husband and wife, but what happens is you still have to share. Para rin kayong husband and wife pa rin, kahit na
Yes.
hindi kayo nagsasama man sa isang bahay.
Yeah.
Because on paper,
You're husband and wife still. So may implications in terms of properties, liabilities. Kaya if you want to fix the situation, you don't want to be responsible for someone's irresponsibility down the road, then you have to fix your situation and the marriage, so you don't incur liabilities that you were not responsible for.
and also if I may also just add, there's a law that how can you date? I mean, because women can be charged with adultery.
Yes, that's also one thing. Until your marriage is terminated, you are supposed to be faithful to each other.
To each other, but the man cannot be charged with
No.
adultery, only
You see,
concubinage.
women just have to do it or be seen with a guy and they could be charged with adultery.
True, I
Men
agree.
have to live with a concubine in a conjugal dwelling under
does
scandalous
that?
circumstances.
Who does that?
Who does that?
Yeah,
Ang
so
dami
it's
pala.
It's
yung
really
double
unfair.
standard of
Yeah.
morality matindi, and that is legitimized by the law kasi nga there's a distinction between adultery and concubinage.
Ang ganda ng pagkasabi ni Attorney Arce, the immorality which is legitimized, and the double standard of immorality which is somehow legitimized by the law. Meron tayong magandang tanong from social media. How about the quickie courts? Hindi lang pala motel ang may quickie. May courts. How about the quickie courts? 6 months lang daw may decision na.
Well, yeah, we know
We've
about
heard
it.
about
We already
those.
said we know about it. We have me personally, no, I haven't
I
experienced it,
I haven't appeared before one.
but it's talked about, and that's why I said that's one argument to have a divorce law so that we have a straightforward process.
And actually, that's a good, because what you were saying was 6 months is so unrealistic, no? Just from the proseso pa lang, pag-file, pag-abot sa judge, hindi na talaga, masyado nang maikli yung 6 months.
It would be wonderful if that happens, but
Yeah,
then
true.
it's irregular.
I agree.
We
Sana
have-
6 months lang, no?
Sana.
3 months lang.
Para
Tapos
you can
na.
move on, no?
Yeah.
Tsaka
Sana 1 week
menos
lang.
gastos.
Hindi naman. Hindi naman pwede.
We have another
Once
question.
pwede.
In our annulments in the Philippines, higher in the younger generation or the older? I actually have the answer to that
Yes.
from the Office of the Solicitor General. Thank you very much for that question. The OSG furnished me with some statistics. The profile of the people who are filing for annulment in the Philippines, 53% are female. Most of them are between the ages of 21 to 25. So to answer that question, they're mostly younger. This is across the board, male and female. Most of them are between the ages of 21 to 25. They have been married between 1 to 5 years, and 82% have children. 94% of annulment cases are granted. 6% are denied.
I'd like to question that.
Question which one? The denial or
The
The
findings,
6%?
the 6%.
6% or 8%?
6? It says
6%.
6.
There are, I would still say 50-50.
For getting an approved
Yes.
petition?
Yes.
Okay, could we go into that a little bit more? What do you mean 50-50?
Denied, you mean? 50%
It
are
could be
denied?
denied, it could be approved. There is no guarantee. If you go to certain courts, 90% of their annulment cases are automatically denied.
Wow.
Certain courts, okay? There are certain courts where they grant most of the time.
Pero
But
these are
they
national
also-
figures, no?
Yes, these
So
are.
I think
This is a
maybe,
random sampling taken from the OSG of the annulment cases that were filed between 2010 and 2011. So they did a random sampling of those cases, and that's what they found. 6%.
I think that maybe also we should factor in the liberality that has happened in the last 5 years in our Supreme Court as well. Kasi dati, once your case reaches the Supreme Court, 99.99% probability it will get denied.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Lahat ng kaso noon na nakakarating sa Supreme Court na nadi-deny yung petition. Yung petition for annulment. Yung annulment na pinag-uusapan natin, yung psychological incapacity. At some point, the Supreme Court became liberal in its treatment of annulment or Article 36 cases to yung psychological incapacity. So there was a turning point in our jurisprudence, and so I think maybe that has affected as well the trend. Pero I say that if you're talking of national figures, I think the 6% is still a lot.
Yeah.
So maybe
Of the
there's a
10,000.
concentration of denials of petitions in certain courts, but if we take it overall nationwide, it's only 6% that's denied. But still, that's a lot still.
I'm going to just qualify that. The random sampling that the OSG did of the 2011 cases, that's a sampling of 10,257. And of that number, but it was taken across a nationwide study, cases, of that number, 6% were denied. I'm going to just backtrack a little bit. Why can it even be denied? If a person has a right, a voluntary right to choose to marry someone, bakit parang that right is being revoked when you want to separate now from that
because
person?
it's so easy to get married. They make it so easy for you to get married, but they make it so difficult for you to get out of it.
Why?
Well, because that's how our Philippine law is. I mean, sorry about it. I'm being sarcastic, but that's the way the law is. Madaling kumuha ng lisensya, madaling magpakasal, but they make it so difficult to get out. Because under our law, they're saying that marriage should be permanent. And so choice, once you exercise the choice in getting married, you can no longer exercise the choice in getting out of it. There's no choice there. The law tells you these are the grounds, and only these grounds.
As someone
And
who has
who
gotten an
drafts the
annulment,
law?
Attorney Castillo.
Men.
Yes, men.
Okay, our Senate and Congress is filled with men, which is why the stark difference between concubinage and adultery has yet to be addressed. Divorce will not be passed. Why? Because of these men. They are so afraid that their wives will leave them.
We're going to go to that later, but we have a question from social media. What can a poor woman do?
It's a very brave statement.
What are her options? So what are the options if you are a poor woman, considering how expensive annulment is?
Save. That's her only option. She has to save money because, annulment is never pro bono.
Oh.
Well, unless
You
you
can't
can
go to
find
the
a
public
lawyer,
attorney's
you can
office.
find a lawyer who will handle it pro bono. I mean, I do sometimes. I handle pro bono Article 36 cases.
Right.
Pero ito ang realidad sa mga mahihirap. Sa mga mahihirap, hindi na sila dumadaan ng korte. Ang hiwalayan sa mahihirap, hiwalayan na lang ng bahay. So, alis na doon, punta na lang
They just
sa kabila, alis sa community, and have another relationship. So yung complications ang tindi.
Actually, minsan din napapansin namin sa communities, hindi na rin nagpapakasal. Mahal din magpakasal.
Yes.
So yung word na asawa is kind of used loosely, no? It's the person you're living with as of the moment. I think they've got a thing going. I mean, that's something we should explore. That might be an easier option. We have another question. Can the ladies please elaborate a little bit more on what is the difference between annulment and divorce?
To be technical about it, kasi medyo we're using it loosely here, no? Pero I mean, if this is a law school class, kailangan natin tatlo yung ating i-distinguish, yung annulment, declaration of nullity, and divorce. Yung declaration of nullity, yun yung ibig sabihin, void from the beginning.
Okay, void from the beginning.
Void from the beginning. Yung annulment, hindi siya void from the beginning. There is just some defect. Like defect, for example, you did not get your parental consent. You were at a certain age when parental consent was required and you didn't get it. So yan, may deadline yan. You can only file a petition there for a period of, if I'm not mistaken, 4 years. Itong declaration of nullity, there's no deadline for it. Alright?
Okay.
Yung divorce, wala siyang pakialam. Yung kasal ba ay valid perfectly? Meron ba siyang defect o wala siyang pakialam. Ang pakialam niya, ano yung nangyari during the time of the marriage? And the marriage failed? The marriage failed, so let's address that. That's the concern of divorce. Itong annulment, yung declaration of nullity, tinatanong niya, what happened at the time of the celebration of the marriage? Was there a defect? Was there an absence of marriage license? The solemnizing officer had no authority to celebrate the marriage, etc. Yung psychological incapacity, yung common na sinasabing annulment, nasa declaration of nullity siya. So these are different terms in law. Pero ang pinag-uusapan lang natin dito, yung annulment na kilala ng mamamayan natin, hindi na mga abogado, at yung divorce, ang pagkakaiba lang nila ganito. Tinatanong ng annulment, psychological incapacity ba o may psychological incapacity ba o wala. Okay. Yung divorce, ang tinatanong lang, ano pa ba, pwede pa ba kayong magpatuloy as husband and wife? Kung hindi na talaga, let's cut the marital ties. Hindi na natin pag-usapan if there was a defect or not.
Which is similar to what they ask you when you want to get married. You voluntarily want to wed this person. I'm going to go back to what we were talking about. You know, we said we had a lot of male legislators in the upper and lower house, and that kind of has implications on our law. I'm going to read out some of the reactions of our senators to the recent survey that we cited, where 60% of Filipinos want divorce. According to Senator Tito Soto, in the lower house, lawmakers might face their wives' fury if they try to pass it.
See?
Senator Soto personally said he will reject the proposal. Senator Bongbong Marcos said, "I love my wife. I do not want to divorce her." And President Aquino himself has gone on record to say that he can't in his conscience allow divorce and turn the Philippines into a Las Vegas where you can get married in the morning and divorced in the evening. I think that's Britney Spears' fault. And the CBCP also reacted to the survey saying that a bad marriage is not grounds for divorce.
May I say something? At the time that you get married, I cannot imagine any person who would think of divorce or separation.
Correct.
At least at the time, except for those who got married for citizenship.
Okay.
True.
But at the time, no. You would always want to live your life with your partner, happily ever after.
And it's not just about that.
Things happen, and you separate. But that's the problem with annulment. You say that my marriage is void from the start. So what was that?
Exactly.
It's a joke. The fact is, I would want to say that my marriage was a happy one, at least for the first 12 years. We broke up in the 13th year. But it was happy for the first 12 years. And I wouldn't want to say that that was a farce, because
Correct.
it was real. We have children. My children are legitimate under the law. Under annulment, my marriage is void. In divorce, you recognize my marriage as valid. I think you would be respecting the sanctity of marriage if you go for divorce.
That was well said.
I think that's also very well said, and really recognizing also that you know the inhumane process that sometimes you have to go through to get an annulment. Senator Pia Cayetano, who has also got an annulment, has also told us that it's very disrespectful to two people who once loved one another and may have even tried to work it out.
Just a quick comment. We're not asking Senator Marcos or Senator Soto to divorce their wives, no? Pag sinabi natin, gusto natin ng divorce law, ibig sabihin, we're giving those who truly need it an option. Hindi natin sinasabi, lahat kayo mag-divorce.
Actually, I was going to say that most of their comments were about themselves.
Exactly.
That's the point, and they are not supposed to further their personal agenda. They are there to represent the will of the majority.
And what do you say about the CBCP says a bad marriage is not grounds for divorce? So is a good marriage grounds for divorce? I'm not sure.
They're not in marriage, so they shouldn't be able to. We should ask the people who are in marriage, who are in miserable, who are in failed marriages.
Okay.
Hindi natin tatanungin yung mga obispo ang pangkaparian.
Okay, we need to wrap up now, but we would like to just end on a few notes. The Gabriela Women's Party List actually has a divorce law that is pending.
Divorce bill.
I'm sorry, divorce bill that is pending. Now, what are the chances of that being passed?
It's not going to be passed.
Okay, Attorney Castillo.
I'm more optimistic. The surveys, I think, tell us that we are ready to have a divorce law in the Philippines. It's something that they cannot stop from happening sooner or later, just like the reproductive health law. It happened, and it happened because of citizen engagement. It happened because we got involved and we told them what we think about it, what we want. So for me, I mean, there's hope. And I think people should tell our legislators, our leaders, what we need. And we need a divorce law, definitely.
Attorney Castillo, would you like to add anything?
Well, for so long as the minds of our legislators are closed, and for so long as they will further their personal agenda, it's not gonna happen.
It's not going to happen, but the people have made themselves heard. We've been talking to annulment lawyers Evelyn Ursua and lawyer Ginger Castillo about divorce in the Philippines. We're talking about the survey that was recently mounted where we saw 60% of Filipinos are now in favor of divorce. The people have spoken. The people have said what they want. Now, we need to make our legislators listen. Will
Yes.
they? I'm Anna P. Santos. Thank you for watching Rappler Talk.